All right, live at the show. Give it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Give it a few seconds here.
Click in, as the Sharks and Sports legend says.
Yeah, if we had some sort of intro music going right now, it would be pumping, but we don't.
Should I Spotify some NFL hot themes?
Yeah, hot beats, hot dudes, hot picks. This is short-term high volatility investments. Give us 2 more seconds. Let me get this retweet going. And we are live. All right. Ant, you ready to rock? Ready to roll?
Let's rock and roll.
All right. What's going on, everybody? My name is Geoff Sheesby, a.k.a. the old man who bets, alongside my main man, Ant Latino. This is short-term high volatility investments, a sports betting podcast looking to find the edge on just about every game, every sport, whatever's hot. But right now we're focusing on Week 14 of the NFL. We got a first-time listener here. Appreciate that. And as Em says, hot beats, hot dudes, hot picks. It's a simple life that we live. I've got my best Yankee hat on because I'm trying to get some of my best picks going. And Tanner, as I've ever seen you, coming back from Hawaii. How we feeling?
How do I look? Hot, ready
you
to
look
go?
like a golden god.
Feels
Bronzed.
great. That is paradise. I left paradise. I will let you know, though, that somehow the snow and the rain and the cold found me right as I was leaving. So glad I escaped, because Hawaii was starting to get weird.
There was snow in Hawaii.
So the Big Island, which we were not on, we were on a different island, but the Big Island, as part of this weird seasonal rain crazy storm that they got, was expecting some snow in some of the higher altitude mountain spots.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you learn something new every day, whether it's on
There you
this
go.
podcast or the weather guy, Ant Latino. I didn't know I didn't know that was a thing. And wow, shout out to Melbourne, Australia.
What's cooking? Appreciate it.
Chilling down under. I appreciate that.
Australia, a very underrated gambling market.
Yeah, what, basketball or something else?
Just in general. No, just the people themselves. They love it. And I think
and
it's
doesn't,
a
right?
sophisticated market, probably way ahead of us in the U.S.
Yeah, for sure. Lockdown capital of the world, he says, which gives you more time to look at sports, look at data, and bet on every game around the world. But anyway, we've got a great slate for you guys today. I don't know if some first-time listeners, hopefully some historical listeners here. A couple weeks ago, we broke down who we thought were overrated and underrated, just looking at Football Insider's strength of schedule past versus future, and wanted to hone in on some of those teams who had schedules easing up and fading some teams who had schedules tightening up, just as a way of saying, hey, maybe these stats are a little inflated or not, or underflated or inflated. I don't know. Over or underrated is the real takeaway there. And yeah, we saw some pretty interesting trends here. But before we dive into that, we want to touch upon our overall record so far, just so everybody knows that we're
let's
doing
do
okay.
a quick recap there. We finally got back to updating. So we did take week 13 off. I went solo for week 12 and gave you a big fat loser, which was surprising because the thing got close on that total. So I still stand by that pick. There was some weird shit that happened at the end of the first half in that Titans-Bills game where nobody wanted to stop anybody. And we didn't quite get the under 44. That thing came in at a 49, and we held on to the second half under, which I did live tweet. So hopefully you got that.
So you
but
salvaged,
overall,
we appreciate that.
Exactly. Overall, I sit at 8-5. You're still cooking at 13-4-1. That's an overall record of 21-9-1. So we've cooled to some degree, but hey, 21-9-1 still profitable.
A nice 2-to-1 ratio of winners to losers. We love to see that. Again, we always talk about kind of practicing what we preach. My NFL record is not as shiny as 13-4-1 on the season because I do chase a little bit. I am human. Sometimes I give in to my gluttonous tendencies. But either way, we're looking to get back on track here. We've only had, 1 week that we've actually lost below 500, which
Correct.
is pretty
Where
good.
we went 0-2.
Yeah,
between us.
and that was recently. So hopefully we can flip the switch here. And we've got a couple of picks. I've got 2, and you have a few.
I have one with a
1.5.
strong lean. I think we might make it official with hey, let's sweep the board with 4-0. Let's go 4-0
bringing the
and get
brooms
weird.
in. That feels good to me. But anyway, let's look at this over, under, and underrated trends, right? A quick
Love
update
that.
here. So after week 10, we looked again at past schedule versus future schedule and highlighted essentially half the league that was overrated and underrated. Overrated, we had the Bills, Rams, Colts, Steelers, Raiders, Bengals, Falcons, and Panthers. All of those had a strength of schedule that was at least 15 points easier than it was going to be coming into the back half of the schedule. Those teams that we highlighted in the last 4 weeks have gone 12, 17, and 1. Pretty interesting. The Colts and the Bengals are actually the only 2 teams within that will have positive records. We've got the Bills at 2-2, the Rams at 1-3, the Colts at 3-1. Maybe they're not as over underrated. This doesn't necessarily say they're bad, right? We were just looking for
potential spots,
gaps, areas to target that might be inflated by public perception.
Yeah, but I think a pretty telling list overall, especially when you look at the record and some of the results there. And none of those teams, to me, jump out. Probably besides the Rams and Colts, maybe. Some of that I think with the Colts is definitely the schedule to date. So we'll see how that shapes up the rest of the way.
And
as
the
it gets
Colts
a
I thought
little
was
bit
so
tougher.
interesting, right? Because they were the 30th easiest strength of schedule moving into the 3.
Yeah.
And then they haven't. I think they're still getting into that kind of the meat of the
Correct.
schedule there. But
I
they
think
did play
it's
the Bucks
still
close.
it's still coming. It's definitely still coming.
Yeah, and that's not to say these teams are bad, right? I mean, some are. The Falcons, they had the 17th easiest schedule, then the second hardest. They went 1-3 in that time, but they were also already a bad team. So just some things to look out for. And we look at the other side of this, right? And with the difficulty easy, we had the 49ers, the Vikings, the Seahawks, the Chiefs, Chargers, Titans, Dolphins, Lions, and Texans. Those teams who had very challenging strength of schedules going into easier ones in that last 4-week period have gone 18, 14, and 1. So we're on to something here. 4 games over 500 and 5 games under 500, at least directionally, that I think validates that the stats we're looking at are accurate and the teams are more or less doing what we thought they would, which always feels good. And hopefully we can translate that into some profits this week.
Yeah, look, one big team that jumps out here again because of when we looked at this compared to the recent streaks, the Dolphins, little 5-0 run, they've climbed themselves back into the playoff hunt. They're probably going to regret some of those early season losses that they had to the likes of the Falcons and the Jags, I think, in some close games.
They also did get lucky on that Patriots win with the Pats
fumbled in week 1. Exactly. And then another team that jumps out to me on here is, 2 that I'll highlight is the 49ers and the Chiefs. I think the 49ers gave one away against Seattle. They really had a chance to keep the momentum going and keep building in the second half of the season that they were, starting to get healthy, starting to get right. But the lack of Debo and I think another playmaker on that offense really hurt them against Seattle, and they just couldn't get enough stops. And then the Chiefs might be back.
I think they're back, and they're 3-0 since we tweeted out that they were underrated.
Yep.
Moving forward, they had the 8th hardest schedule moving into the 19th, so not the biggest change between any of the teams here, but nonetheless, playing some softer teams and are starting to cover. I loved that Denver line last week. We hit that at 8.5 covered, which was great. Yards wasn't as great, but hey, they made the plays when they needed to.
Yeah, I think you've seen that offense change a little bit. They're not putting up, the ridiculous point numbers, but they covered that spread against Denver. They controlled the clock. They controlled the game. Mahomes, I think the final stat line, he had no touchdowns and he ran one in, right? But no passing TDs, and he threw a pick. So not a sexy stat line. Not 35, 40 plus points that we might be used to them seeing in the past. But I think you're seeing a better running game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is back. The defense is getting healthy, and I think you're seeing that translate. It just might be a more complete team out of Kansas City, even though it's not the offensive juggernaut. And that ultimately might be a better fit down the stretch, than just the offense and relying on Patrick Mahomes.
Can you still hear me here?
Yeah.
All right, great. And in two last things in this 18, 14, and 1 on the difficulty easy schedules, 2 that stick out here. We got the Vikings at 2-2, but they've also been losing Dalvin Cook. And then you got the Titans at 1-2. They lost Henry. So, that's one of those things that, really just muddies the waters. Not to say that Madison hasn't been good. Not to say that Foreman and Hilliard haven't been good. As they have been. They've filled in admirably, but nonetheless, that, I think, kind of muddies the waters. We also had the Lions, who are the worst team in the league, right? They had the 7th hardest, moving to the 18th easiest. They went 1-2-1. They got that win. Their other 2 losses were both under 3 points. So, if anything, even though they are hurting the overall win-loss record there, close losses, I think they covered all 4 of those games, still very, very interesting. So, does that take us to week 14?
Let's get back into the winning circle.
Men. So anyway, before we dive into Week 14, we reran this exercise of strength of schedule, past versus future, coming into the end of the season, and have a couple, again, targets and fades. Targets in terms of challenging schedule, moving into easy. We've got the 49ers, the 7th hardest on the season, the 31st easiest or 31st hardest moving forward. So second easiest schedule. You've got the Chiefs from 4 to 23, the Chargers from 3 to 29, the Saints from 6 to 30, the Seahawks, who could be a good buy low here. They look broken, but they are an NFL team, 2 to 28, and the Titans still number 1 to 32. Other side of that, easy strength of schedules moving into the gauntlet of their schedule. You've got the Cardinals 21 to 6, the Rams 26 to number 1. So very easy schedule to the hardest schedule. And we did see that already where they went 1-3, but they lost to the Titans, the 49ers, and the Packers. They're losing to good teams, but either way, maybe a little inflated. I think they were favorites on all 3 of those. Don't quote me on that, but
They might miss Jared Goff is really the punchline there, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. Stafford, just the poor man's Goff, as they say. But anyway, we'll keep going through here. The Colts 29 to 8, the Ravens 25 to 9, the Bengals 32 to 5, the Raiders 20 to 4, and the Panthers 27 to 2. So some of these teams that have been kind of, treading water in the 500 range, moving into very tough parts of their schedule, could be an interesting fade.
Oh, yeah. So how do some of these play into your first pick? Do we have
so
alignment?
first week I'm looking at, and, I've tried to take this to another level of using the DVOA percentage, which is a Football Outsiders statistic, which we love, right? It's comparing essentially the performance of every play of every outcome to league average. DVOA stands for Defense Adjusted Value Over Average. And it's looking essentially for defense. It's looking at an adjusted percentage of just about everything, right? Again, comparing it to the normal in baseball, this would be FIP versus expected FIP versus ERA, which we think is interesting. So what I've been looking at is looking at the percentage of DVOA difference, if that makes sense, between teams. A DVOA is listed at a percentage. The best in the league, I think, right now is the Bucs. It's like plus 32%. The worst in the league, I believe, is the Falcons right now at something like minus 37%, and it goes through 0, obviously. And so I've been looking at when there's a large gap in percentage, you should have a very strong line. If you're 20 percentage points better, you should be, minus 10 or more. If you're 1 percentage difference or the same, the line should be a pick'em in theory, right? So I've just been looking for fishy lines on that. If it's a large gap in percentage and a small line, I'm looking to target the underdog. If it's a small gap in percentage with a big line, I'm looking to target probably the favorite there. And we had some good examples. Last week, the Dolphins were a perfect example of this going well. Yep. They were actually ranked lower in terms of percentage versus the Giants, but were favorites. So based off a DVOA percentage, they shouldn't have been favorites, let alone 6.5-point favorites. Yeah. They win and cover. This doesn't always work well. Saints on Thursday. It was a Thursday night football, I think.
Correct.
Last week. Also,
because both these teams played on Thanksgiving, and then they got the next Thursday night game.
Yep, exactly. Where the Saints, large percentage, small line, but then Taysom Hill goes out and throws 4 interceptions. So they won the total yards battle. They won the time of possession battle. They won the more first down battle, and they had a better third down conversion. But if you throw 4 picks, all bets are off. But anyway, that's kind of the strategy I'm looking to compare here. I'm looking to match line strength based off DVOA versus spread with strength of schedule so far. And this first one here brings me to the Chiefs. I'm looking at the Chiefs minus 9. The Chiefs here have an 18.6 percentage difference in DVOA this week, and the line is sitting at minus 9. And I'm categorizing this as a strong line based on what other spreads are, right? We look at the 49ers here. The 49ers have a 21 percentage difference. That's a pick'em. The Saints have a 29% difference. That's minus 5. Dallas has a 33% difference. That's only 3.5. Seattle, probably on the stronger side here, 30 percentage difference, 7.5. Carolina, 21% in difference. 2.5. So to have 18 at 9 versus a 33% difference at 3.5, this is Vegas telling me this is one of the strongest lines of the week. And we look at the strength of schedule; it's a perfect alignment here as well. The Chiefs, again, they were 3-0 when we analyzed them last time. And the Raiders have gone 1-3 since we identified them as overrated. And closing out the season here, we've got the Chiefs, who had the fourth hardest schedule, moving into the 23rd. The Raiders at 20, moving into the fourth hardest. So very interesting there. So I love that
Yeah, and one
combination
thing
of
on that line
strength.
too is that's line strength in a division game,
Exactly.
right? Which typically you do even see that line shrink a little bit more,
Yeah, big time, man. Big time. So that feels great. Just as we loved the Chiefs last week at -9, 8.5 versus Denver, I think it was, win and cover. Going back to the well here, I think it's one of the strongest lines on the board. And again, that strength of schedule difference is obviously great. No need for me to go into personal player stats. We know who Patrick Mahomes is. We know who Travis Kelce is. We know who Tyreek Hill is. And, of course, we're familiar with, I guess, less familiar with the banged-up Raiders here. But Bryan Edwards, I don't know. Maybe he gets it going. I guess the one thing to touch upon is this Chiefs defense. They have been playing pretty well these last few weeks.
Much better, yeah.
And honestly, a little reminiscent of some of their deep playoff Super Bowl runs, and a defense that very much overperformed based off of statistics coming in to close out the season and tightening up. And I think we're starting to see that. They're still ranked pretty poorly in terms of defensive efficiency, but they're holding teams to not that many points. So
yeah, look, they started getting a little healthier against the Packers, although that was Jordan Love. They gave up 7 points there, 14 points in the last game at the Raiders in a 41-14 victory. I think that was the one to me that really felt like they got rolling. 9 points to the good old Dallas Cowboys, a great offense. They held them down, and Dak looked kind of pedestrian. And then, nothing too impressive for me about the Denver offense. But again, 22-9, they controlled that game. So I think you're on the right side of this. I think the Chiefs want to keep rolling.
Yep, love that. So you want to kick over to you? So that's the first pick. Chiefs -9. That line's available right now on DraftKings.com at -110. So we're locked and loaded.
I'm going to the swamplands of Jersey, as Bruce Springsteen likes to say. And we are targeting the Saints. -5 at the New York Football Jets, a scrappy but not very good football team. And one of the reasons I like this overlap with what you were talking about was, the Saints are kind of in that, discussion in terms of, what we would expect with the DVOA difference, what we would expect with the strength of schedule, kind of regression going forward. So schedule is supposed to get easier for them. This Jets game is a great indication of that. They do have a 29.8% difference. Now this line is only -5. So, kind of middle of the road. Sometimes we call that 4.5 to 5.5 zone, the Vegas zone, because it's outside of that field goal, but below a touchdown. But I do like anything below a touchdown here for the Saints. And that's really because I think this is the get right spot that they ultimately need. Now, since that Jameis injury in the Bucs victory for the Saints, the team has gone 0-5, and it's looked ugly at times, close at times. But to me, this is really about the quarterback position. It's about an offense that's gotten banged up. They haven't had Alvin Kamara against Dallas and over the last few games in this slide. I think Kamara went out in week 9. The two tackles, both the right tackle and the left tackle, were out against Dallas, and they've been out, for a few games here. And I think Kamara is expected to play. The offensive line is still questionable, but I do think you probably get one, if not both of them, back in the lineup. And at the end of the day here, the Saints, especially defensively, are just much, much better than the Jets. The Jets currently have a -150 point differential. They're sitting 24th offensively in DVOA, 32nd defensively, good for 28th overall. So, how does an offense get right? Well, one, they get healthy. They get their staple running back, which will only help in a backup quarter situation, whether it's Taysom Hill or Trevor Siemian here. I don't think it matters because I think what they can target is that 30th DVOA ranked defensive rushing attack for the Jets, and kind of just ground and pound through this thing. I would love it if it was closer to a field goal, but I do think if you stay under that 6 range by the time this gets to Sunday, I like it in that 5 to 6 range. They have the rest advantage coming off of that Thursday night matchup. The Jets did play on Sunday. So even with the travel, a couple days rest to game plan to get right. Sean Payton does not want to see this team go 0-6 over their last 6. And, from a special team standpoint, if you're worried about the points, the Jets don't even have a kicker. They signed somebody off the streets last week who came in and missed 2 extra points. So I don't know when we'll see him again or what they're going to do in the special teams game. So I'm looking for the Saints offense to get better, get a little bit more right. They are 21st on offense, but they're 5th on defense. And I just think, against a rookie quarterback getting more healthy, I think you're going to have a offense that can control the clock a little bit more, finally put some points on the board, especially against a bad Jets defense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Saints defense is going to get back into form, knowing they have to do a lot to prop the rest of the team up, attack the rookie quarterback. I think Peyton and the team is going to have something well scripted, and I think that 5 is not a concern.
Yeah, man, I agree. This was one that was tough for me because on paper, looking at the DVOA, versus spread, it was a really good line for the Jets. But I think I love the points you brought up. Run versus Kamara coming back, and just recency bias, right? Taysom Hill throws 4 interceptions. They should have covered that game. Obviously not. You throw 4 interceptions, you shouldn't cover that game. But that's like an outlier in terms of professional football, throwing
Correct.
4 interceptions. So I like.
Yeah, and you looked at that game early on. The Saints were in it, and I think it was more a matter of frustration and things leading to finally the Cowboys being able to open things up, with some of those turnovers, with some of the stagnation on offense. But again, I don't think it matters if you see Taysom Hill or Trevor Siemian or a combination of the two of them, because I think they're finally going to get back to what they want to do on offense.
Man, I like it. Maybe I'll join you. I had that one as like,
come on over,
fishy, but maybe you should still play it.
Yeah. Do I fall for the trap?
Yeah, but I appreciate your analysis on it, which I love a good trap. We love the trap lords here. All right, cool. So let's keep it moving here. We're at 21 minutes into this podcast. We've got 9 minutes to go to keep it under an episode of The Office, which is usually that sweet spot. I'm going to come back to another big favorite here. I'm looking at the Chargers minus 10.5. I am a little concerned. Eckler's banged up, bruised and beaten or something along those lines, I think was what the coach used to describe him, but expected to practice all week, expected to play. Keenan Allen, also COVID list, but vaccinated. He could be back. It's a home game, so any sort of logistics of traveling aren't going to be an issue. But nonetheless, keep an eye on that. The line should drop if either of those guys are announced out. But at 10.5 is what I'm looking at it right now. And, we'll keep this one short and sweet, right? Strength of schedule target here. The Chargers had the 3rd hardest. Now they're moving into 29th. The Giants, kind of a whatever burger here, 15th to 12th, so they should be getting harder as well. But I do think this Chargers offense is considerably and just consistently, I should say, underrated here. They obviously tossed that dud up against Denver. At Denver is always a tough place to play. We've seen Tom Brady over the course of his career struggle there as well. So not particularly concerned about them. And then you look at the Bengals game last week. They're up 24-0, something along those lines. They made that game close as well. So I just feel like people aren't ready to believe in the Chargers, which is okay. But the facts here are that the Chargers are ranked number 2 offensively in terms of overall DVOA, where the Giants are 28th. Defense is a little bit closer here. Giants are 13th. Chargers are 19th. But nonetheless, we've got a strong pass and rush offense from this Chargers team. They should move the ball however they want, right? They'll get crafty. The Giants here, 1-5 on the road versus 3-3 at home. I think that's very interesting. Their average road loss is by 8.3 points. However, if you remove that 1 in the 1-5, only looking at their on-the-road losses, that increases to 11.8, at 10.5. We're right there. And we looked at team rankings as well. The Giants are ranked 26th on teamrankings.com. Those other stats from DVOA are from Football Outsiders. But how have the Chargers at home been against similarly ranked teams? Against the Raiders, number 24, they won by 14. And against the Steelers, number 22, they only won by 4. But if we recall that game, that was 27 fourth quarter points allowed, where one dude tried to get out of the way of a punt and it hit him in the back of the foot on the 4. And then Herbert threw an interception on his own 10. So that's insane turnovers. I don't think those are going to be statistically significant at any point. Total outliers, a terrible beat. So I think this feels like enough at 10.5. Of course, I want to talk about that DVOA strength as well. The Chargers are 20% better in terms of DVOA efficiency at a minus 10.5 points. There was only 4 lines that I thought really were strong. The first was the Chiefs. The second was the Chargers. The third was the Packers at 25% better and 11-point favorites, and the Titans at 18%. and 8.5-point favorites. So a lot of the other lines that we already talked about before, the Niners at 21% better, and a pick'em, the Saints 29%, only 5, Dallas 33%, only 3.5. This Chargers is falling in a perceived strong line with, I think, underrated overall performance and a great strength of schedule split, which only should make their numbers look better. So I'm going to be playing the Chargers as well at 10.5. Of course, watch out for those injuries, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, as long as I don't bet the Chargers, you should be fine because I think I've been on the wrong side of them this year anytime I take them. So I'll stay away. You win the bet, and everybody cashes.
I love it. I hope so. Fingers are crossed, toes are crossed, eyes are crossed. I'm even crossing my legs right now under the table. You can't see it.
Boom. So let's bring it home with one final pick. We're going to stretch this thing all the way to Monday. So now you have Sunday winners. You go 3-0. You roll the bankroll over into Monday. Those are good betting habits. Just kidding. One unit at a time, bet by bet. But we do have a play for Monday night. I'm actually targeting the Rams on the road plus 2.5 at the aforementioned Arizona Cardinals, who are a target to fade. Now that's been dangerous this year. I've been wrong on them a lot. They are 10-2. They were rolling without maybe the MVP, Kyler Murray. I think he might have missed too many games. But overall, when you look at these two teams, very evenly matched from a DVOA perspective. 5th on offense, 6th on defense for the Rams to come in at 6th overall. 12th on offense, 3rd on defense for Arizona to come in at 5th overall. So I think it's what you expect from both these teams. The Cardinals probably playing a little bit ahead of what we expected coming into the year. The Rams, maybe faltering back a little bit. But I do think they're kind of a target to get right. They've made a lot of moves. People joke about them being the all-star team that's thrown together. But I think the bye helped. I know they did have a loss coming out of that, but the Jag spot last week might have just been the get right that they finally needed. They put the wall up on them. They covered the game. They looked good on both sides of the ball, something you'd expect against Jacksonville. But the hope is that this would get them going. I think one interesting thing to point out here was just kind of the line overall. Arizona did cover when the Rams were a 3.5-point favorite at home in LA. They won that game 37-20. They dominated the second half. They were actually up 13-0 in the second half to kind of extend what was a close game at halftime until there was a garbage TD, with about a minute left for Stafford and the Rams. So I kind of would have expected that line to come out higher. So I actually think this thing is showing strength, to the Rams because, again, you're in Arizona and sitting at plus 2.5. It's just kind of a stock. Here's the home team. We're going to give them some points. You'd expect on a 17-point win that they would have gotten some strength, going forward. That's not really the case here. So I think the Rams in a bit of a revenge spot in the second game of a 2-game series, obviously in the division matchup. And you look at where these teams are, again, evenly matched from a DVOA perspective. The Rams need this win badly. Arizona 10-2 sitting in kind of the driver's seat for a top seed and for the division crown. 8-4, the Rams kind of clinging to a messy NFC playoff picture and maybe trying to keep their division hopes alive. You got to at least split with the Cardinals, and then you're going to need some help down the stretch, but you got to take care of business first and foremost. So I think the downside is the Cards obviously do get a little bit healthier. Last week they did get Hopkins back and Murray back, but you still don't know those guys' health overall. And really one thing I dug into that stood out to me was when you look at the box score of the Cardinals' last victory, 33-22 against the Bears, who I don't think are, in the same stratosphere as the Rams, especially offensively. This is with Andy Dalton at quarterback. And it's similar to the Taysom Hill Saints point that you mentioned. Dalton threw 4 picks. When you look at the stat line, the Bears dominated every single piece of that game. Dominated, I probably shouldn't use that word, but 26 first downs to 14 for the Cardinals. 6 for 15 on third down versus 5 to 11. They had more overall yards, 329 to 257. The big difference was the interceptions thrown, 4-0, completely lost the turnover battle, which did hurt them ultimately in a 33-22 game. But I think that's a bit of a, weak performance for the Arizona defense from a stat perspective. They obviously won the turnover battle, but I think you're going to get a different approach from McVay and the Rams coming into this thing. I think the line, like I said, shows good strength to them, and I just like this spot for the Rams to get it done as an underdog.
Maybe hopefully Maybe OBJ gets a little more involved. I'd like to see more than 2 for 28 and a touchdown. The touchdown was nice, but
Yeah, he could. He
um,
definitely. I think you felt like he started to last week a bit. So I
yeah.
think the bye combined with even that loss against the Packers and then into this win, hopefully something that gets them and that offense going. Stafford needs to be better. That's what this is going to come down to. Like he cannot turn the ball over. I don't know exactly how many picks and pick sixes he's thrown, but it's felt like a lot lately. So I don't know if they try to get more conservative on offense. But again, I think look for the defense to step up in a big way and look
hmm
for the offense to hopefully get right.
Yeah, and hopefully this game is as good as it should be on paper. I've got no action on this one. This one was weird for me, right? You got, Kyler coming back, Hopkins coming back. They looked fine, but Hopkins was kind of limited. He only had like 2 catches as well. And then, the DVOA splits are about equal. So historically, I'd go with the underdog. I haven't really figured out how to categorize because a lot of times last week as well, we were seeing like close to equal, and 2 to 3.5 seemed pretty stock on that. So I just didn't get a good read either way. But I think your analysis is pretty spot on, and I don't know if I'll be tailing officially, but you've got me almost sold, Ant. We'll have to
I'll
keep
get
talking
you by
throughout the
Sunday
weekend.
night. By Sunday night, I'll have you.
Yeah,
I'll
you've
have
got
you in
another
the palm of
5
my hand.
days to lock in this one.
Yeah. Hey, look,
Um,
maybe you wait it out and it gets to 3. I don't know if I'm probably gonna lock in at 2.5
yeah.
before, but if that thing hits 3 or 3.5 for any reason, you can bet I'll be going back to the well.
I love that. So, quick summary here. I'm on the Chiefs -9 and the Chargers -10.5. Watch out for injuries on the Chargers. And Ant here is on the Rams +2.5, as well as the Saints -5 in the Meadowlands. So all good things there. Chris Customs in the chat. We don't do UFC often, but mainly because we only have 30 minutes on here.
But we can
could
get
do
Bo.
some.
We should get Bo in here. Do
Yeah,
something
yeah. Check
UFC
out
wise.
Bo Templin's show, also on 137pm.com. He's a UFC specialist. He's got some great interviews with assorted fighters and trainers and things along those lines. Also does some content for DraftKings. But neither here nor there. Thank you again for listening. New listeners, old listeners, moderately new listeners, moderately old listeners, everybody in between. My name is Geoff Sheesby, a.k.a. the old man who bets. That's Ant Latino, the odds fellow. You can find us both on Twitter for any questions, comments, or concerns. This always will be, and short-term high volatility investments. Until next week.